It's very deceiving. I show all this great habitat work and private land work that we can do while we're hunting, including water holes, mock scrapes, food plots, things that we can actually implement on private land that we can't implement on public land. But if you'll scour through my articles, you'll see that I've hunted public land for a long time. In fact, my first buck was shot on public land back in 1986. So going back a very long ways. And I've hunted public land almost every year, 17 years in Pennsylvania, 6 years in Ohio now, and many years, almost every year for the last 30 years in Michigan. So a lot of public land experience. I think I've shot about 25 bucks on public land. Interesting, you scour through the social media and Facebook pages, you know, you look at public land, you got to work really hard. You got to go out and spend days and days and days of scouting. And I even had a recent comment by someone that said, you know, those bucks are nice, but I just don't have that kind of time to scout. I'm here to tell you guys, it doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes smarter scouting efforts. A lot of time to make habitat improvements. I spend a lot more time on my private lands per buck than I do on public land per buck. Now, I'm not narrowing it down to a specific buck on public land typically. I have had maybe 6 or 7 target bucks over the year that I was specifically going after that buck, including the one in Ohio last year. But at the same time, it doesn't take a lot of time. I would guess that per buck, I'm averaging about 2 days of scouting at the most. But you have to learn how to take a lot of habitat and turn it into just a few acres that you're scouting. For example, in the UP areas where you have giant marshes, I'm taking out all the huge wet areas. I'm taking out all the large conifer stands, and I'm focusing on the narrow little islands and ridge points that connect and funnel deer. I'm looking at those islands. I used to take a card and I'd print it out on that card, and back in the late 90s, and I'd draw it out and I'd check this little island, then, you know, come back. I might have a day of scouting total into that whole area, and then I'm making a plan and hunting from there. So I'm narrowing down 10,000 acres into a couple hundred to look. Same with big woods areas that have frequent clear-cut rotations. I'm focusing purely on the clear-cuts, and I'm focusing purely on clear-cuts that are 5 years old or younger. If you have those rotations, those deer are gonna follow those young patterns of new cuttings, and I'm really ignoring everything else. I'm ignoring the big blocks of timber. They're not gonna hold that lot of deer, and I'm just focusing on that age of clear-cut. Topography. We're in an area right here where it's extremely hilly. It goes up like a cliff down there. There's a ravine down the bottom here on this public land tract. And I'm taking out all the very, very steep terrain, and I'm taking out the bottom cuts. I'm taking out the access points where people are. I'd like to get at least a half hour, 45 minutes off the road. And I'm just focusing on those narrow constrictions of benches that match with saddles, that match with points, and areas that you can take a heavy topography area and really X out about 90 to 95% of the acres to where I'm only focusing on this. And when you match that with maybe a timber cutting, with a creek system, maybe a marsh down at the bottom or a swamp, you can really narrow it down the more habitat changes you have it coming into one spot. You can figure all that out with a topo map and an aerial photo. It doesn't take more hours on public land. It just takes the ability to X out thousands of acres at a time, to focus on a couple hundred acres, spend a day of looking that over, mark some tree stand spots. Now you have the luxury of cameras. Of course, you can follow sign, rub scrapes. I love historical sign. If you see that deer have been in these areas for many years and they've left rubs and scrapes, that's a lot more important than finding a hot scrape at the moment that doesn't appear, or a hot rub that doesn't appear that this has been used for years at a time. Historical sign is really good. So again, it doesn't take a lot of work. It just takes a lot of pre-planning, looking over aerial photos, topo maps, coming up with a game plan, going in and looking at 6 or 7 specific areas in a small area. You've X'd out a lot of non-huntable area. Might be some good spots in there, it doesn't really matter. You're looking for the great spots off the road, and you're going in with a game plan, and in the end, you're spending a lot less time for bucks on public land than you are if you're really heavily working a private land spot and doing it right.